Hey everybody, my name is Nada, and
My name is Ankush.
we are going to be talking to you about the future of religious organizations in New York City. Yay! Alright, so researching the future of religious organizations. Why would we want to research these? Well, with the diversity of New York City comes diversity of religion. So you have Christians, Muslims, Jews, a whole bunch of various religions. So a large portion of New York City's population visits religious organizations and relies on them for certain religious and leadership development services. And we're going to talk about that later. And so these organizations need to survive if we want them to continue providing these services.
Okay, so the next question to ask is, how will we research and analyze these organizations to speculate their survival? To aid our analysis, we will use theories from well-known sociologists named Max Weber and Gideon Kunda. We argue that the survival of these religious organizations is highly dependent on two important factors. Firstly, their ability to pass on organizations' culture to the next generation. We will formally define culture shortly. And secondly, their ability to organize with a formalized structure, division of labor, rules, and hierarchy. To represent religious organizations in New York City, we observed a Sikh temple in Richmond Hill, Queens, and a Muslim nonprofit leadership organization. Alright, so first we'll talk about the Sikh temple in Richmond Hill. We performed two covert participant observations. One was a busy day and one was a normal day. And the temple has a large prayer room, a longer hall where people could eat, and additional rooms for clubs and activities, and for workers to actually live in. Jobs that workers would have include doing prayers, distributing prasad, which is holy food, and managing the langar hall. Also, the temple is highly dependent on volunteers. And on Sunday, there could actually be more than 25 volunteers working in the langar hall, making and distributing food.
Alright, so I observed this organization, which we'll call the Muslim Nonprofit Leadership Organization, perform two covert participant observations, meaning I'm a member of the organization, but they weren't aware that I was performing an observation on the organization. So I did one on Friday in February and one on Saturday in March. And this is a religious, social, cultural, and educational organization. So it focuses on the personal development of individuals through a comprehensive Islamic educational curriculum. And it provides community service, interfaith initiatives, youth programs, and civil engagement. And the thing with this organization is that it's a nationwide organization. But it doesn't have a headquarters in New York City. So I actually had to observe two different areas, like a mosque in the Bronx and a mosque in Queens. One of them was a meeting, and the other one was the Bronx subchapter of the organization in action, like the youth aspect of that, at least.
It's important to note that there's great limitation in this research because we only performed two observations. So it might not represent the organizations properly, but we still believe that we could make meaningful conclusions based on the general activities.
So going into the theories that we mentioned earlier on, so we have this guy named Kunda. He came up with this theory called corporate culture theory. And basically his theory emphasizes the idea of normative control. And so the idea that the organization enforces a culture on its employees. And this culture can include thoughts, ideas, rules, and customs that eventually becomes a norm in the organization that the members continue to follow. And he mentions that control by culture can be more effective in some cases than traditional authoritative methods. So basically making people want to do the job through the culture of the organization.
The second theory, it's cut off a little bit, but it's Weber's theory of bureaucracy. And it involves organizations that have characteristics like a fixed division of labor, hierarchy of offices, general rules, and recruitment of individuals based on technical qualifications. Alright, so we analyze each organization with each theory. So under Weber's theory of bureaucracy, the Sikh temple, if you analyze it, you would see that the temple has a clear fixed division of labor among the workers and even the volunteers. A strict set of general rules that everyone has to follow, like taking off your shoes before entering the temple, washing your hands before eating or praying, and covering your head with a patka. And under Kunda's theory of corporate culture, you can see that the organization relies heavily on control by culture. Now, this is really important because in Sikhism, it's selfless service to others is really important, and it's called seva. And basically, through this, the organization uses religious values to provide the temple with many volunteers, and it could also control the organization through this. Moreover, many of the temple's rules are based on religious beliefs, resulting in high cooperation from workers and volunteers and visitors. To take it a step further, visitors themselves actively enforce these rules.
Now, analysis of the Muslim Leadership Organization. So following Kunda's culture theory, this organization is based and run on Islamic values. So you can say that the culture of this organization is like the Islamic value aspect of it. And one of the things that is emphasized in the Islamic faith is serving the community. And so you'll find that majority of the individuals in this organization are volunteers, and they want to help the community. And so that also builds cooperation amongst the workers. And then, so other aspects in terms of how the faith drives the organization, call to prayer. You will find that any time, any given moment, whether it's during a meeting, during an activity, whatever, if it's time to pray and, the call to prayer comes on which we call the adhan, the workers will go and pray. They'll stop what they're doing, they'll pray. And also gender relations, there's certain boundaries that are kept between like men and women. For example, like when I observed the Bronx subchapter of this organization, I observed the youth aspect of it. So there's youth programs going on in the mosque. However, there's a separate youth program for girls and a separate one for guys. And so, so there's boundaries in that aspect. Following Weber's bureaucracy. So Weber mentions how there's a hierarchical structure, right? And so this organization has board of trustees, board of directors, and a whole bunch of committees. Like you'll have the outreach committee, youth committee, marketing committee, the personal development committee. And so the board of directors has to go back to the board of trustees. The committees have to go back to the board of directors. And within each committee itself, you have heads whom the members of the committees would have to report back to. So there is definitely a hierarchical structure in this organization.
So we conclude that the Sikh temple and the Muslim organizations are both highly dependent on control by culture through religious values. They also rely on a formal bureaucracy to organize. Therefore, their survival is dependent on maintaining these characteristics. Culture and religious values are maintained through regular attendance, and its bureaucratic structure has survived so far and will likely continue to survive.
Some other factors to consider: opposition from the state. So, for example, the state may consider a religious organization or claim that a religious organization is performing like criminal activity, right? And actually, one example of this is, I don't know if you guys are aware of the NYPD surveillance that's been going on in Muslim student associations, and so that's definitely one example. Hate groups. So you might have people who don't necessarily like a particular religion or faith, and so they'll organize against organizations who promote that faith. Competition between different faith-based organizations. So a lot of these organizations actually provide very similar services. So you might have a church, for example, that provides or comes up with newer ideas and provides more beneficial services than the mosque in the same community, and so that might create competition within that community. Loss of faith as well. So as we notice, these organizations are driven by faith. Like people are motivated to work because of their faith. And so if you have a loss of faith in the community, you're not going to have workers who want to perform these jobs. And so these organizations will not necessarily sustain.
And we would like to add that we actually further analyze these organizations and their and analyze them with the other perspectives on a longer presentation we have available online. So you can look to that if you would like.